Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and we are in 1 Timothy chapter 3. We're starting verse 2 this lesson. But before we begin, our theme verse for Lunch with the Lord, Jeremiah 15, verse 16. Thy words were found, and I did eat them. And thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, he says here in verse 2, we go back to verse 1, says, this is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desires a good work. Now, verse 2, a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Now, in the next 6 verses, from verses 2 to 7, Paul is going to mention 13 different qualities that a man should have in order to be considered for the office of a bishop. Now, I'm not going to go over each one of them, but I do want to highlight some of them and bring out the meaning of them in this lesson. So he says in verse 2, a bishop then must be blameless. And the Greek word for blameless is anepileptos. And it begins with a prefix of a, which makes the whole word negative. And then it's epi, which is upon, and then lambano, which means to take. So this Greek word here means not to take hold of something. Not to take hold of something. Now, this does not mean that the bishop must not have a criminal record. Okay? It means that he must live his life in such a way that there is nothing that anyone can take hold of and use against him or the church. It deals with living an honest and a godly life. So he says here, a bishop then must be blameless. It's not just talking about, someone in prison or whatever that. It just means that a person who wants to become a bishop, don't give any room for the enemy, all right? Any leeway for the enemy. Anything that the enemy can take a hold of and use against you or against the church. For example, in Daniel chapter 6, I'm sure you've read this and heard messages on this. Daniel chapter 6 verse 4 says, then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel. The presidents and princes didn't like Daniel, and they were trying to get rid of Daniel. So they were trying to find an occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none, no occasion or fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Daniel is a perfect example of what he's talking about here concerning the word blameless. Don't live your life in a way that it gives people in the world an opportunity to point and say, yeah, but I saw you and I did this and I know this about you. And don't give them an opportunity to lay hold of anything in your life, all right? So he says, must be blameless, and then it says, the husband of one wife. Now, it does not say that the bishop must be a husband. Paul is not saying that a bishop must be married. It's not what he's saying here. He's not saying that God didn't say here that the bishop has to be married. It doesn't say that. Paul is saying that if a bishop is married, then it is to be to one woman only. Now, it may be hard for for you to conceive this in your mind, to imagine this, but back in the time that these letters were written, the New Testament was written, polygamy was much more rampant, way much more rampant than it is in the world today. Okay, it's much more common. And also divorce was, well, we have divorce today also, but divorce was also very common among people in that day. And this is what Paul is dealing with here, is that Paul is dealing with polygamy and the desire to divorce and remarry often. It was not everybody, but there were people who divorced and remarried. Men divorced their wives and remarried them for menial reasons, and they did it. And Paul is saying, look, we can't have this in the church. This is not allowed. All right? Why? Why is Paul dealing with this? Because Paul just said that the bishop must be blameless. Don't allow the enemy, don't give them anything to lay hold on against your life and use it against you or the church. Yeah, so polygamy has got to be gone. It's got to be out. A bishop should show how commitment, honesty, and purity, how committed he is to his wife, how honest and pure he is to his wife. So this is why he has to be blameless. Also, and this is important, it does not mean that the bishop can only have been married once in his life. Now there are churches, there are churches out there who do teach that if you've been married and your wife dies, doesn't matter how old you are when she dies, but you are not allowed to get remarried. Okay, you can't. If you get married at 20 years old and your wife dies when you're 21, these churches teach you cannot ever be remarried the rest of your life. All right, and don't even think about going for any kind of an office in the church. So it's not talking about that at all. I don't think that, honestly, I don't think that that's the heart of God, to forbid a man to remarry again if his wife dies. I don't think that's God's heart. But some churches take this to the nth degree, and they say, you'd be the husband of one wife. Okay, and their thinking is one wife for your whole life, and it doesn't say that at all. It just says the husband of one wife, because they don't consider the times that this was written in, and what the churches were facing at that time. That polygamy was much more happening in people's lives back then than it is now. So he says here, the husband of one wife, and then he says vigilant and then sober. Sober here, the Greek word is sophron. And sozo means to save, and phren means the mind. So sophron, we have sozophren, saving the mind. All right, sober. It's one who is under self-control, of a sound mind. They have their passions and their desires in check. So a bishop must be blameless, nothing anybody can take a hold of. The husband of one wife, don't get involved in divorce and remarry and polygamy. Be an honest, true husband to your wife, one wife. And then sober, meaning that you are under self-control. You are not under the influence of this world system. all right? But you are one who has a sound mind, all right? And then it says here, of good behavior. And good behavior here is kosmios. And this is not a good translation of this Greek word. Good behavior is not a good translation of kosmios. Kosmios means order. It means to have your life in order, to act like a gentleman, or to be dignified, to have an ordered life. So he says here, be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, and then of good behavior. It means to lead a dignified life. All right? It means to have your life in order. And to be that when people see you and they know of your life, they know that you are a man who has his life, who has his priorities in order. All right? And then it says here, given to hospitality, and lastly, apt to teach. And this Greek word is didaktikon. And it means not just one who has a desire to teach, because there's a lot of people in churches today who have a desire to teach, but it means one who is qualified and skilled in teaching. All right? So there are in churches, there are people who have a desire to teach, but they're not qualified. First off, they haven't gone to school and been taught themselves and learned. And then secondly, they're not skilled in teaching, in their communication skills, how to communicate the Word of God. And again, it's not like Paul said in Corinthians, it's not like, with vibrant words and, flashy bells and lights and like that. It's not that. The Word of God we are to speak the Word of God, and it's the Word of God that's the power of God unto salvation. All right, speaking the Word. But there is a need to be somewhat skilled in teaching and to be qualified. To be qualified means to be taught properly. All right. So we're going to start verse 3 next lesson. So until then, walk with the Lord. I know He walks with you.